Yeah, but we're gonna have fun tonight. We're gonna talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. The first question I got to ask you guys is: so we got the theatrical, and then we got the director's cut. I find that I watch the theatrical more often. I don't know why that is. Do I watch it because it's a little shorter, a little bit more condensed, or? But I just watched the director's cut again just yesterday, just to refresh myself on this. And there's definitely some differences. Which ones do you guys prefer, Nick? Which one do you like the best?
So I'm different with it. It's kind of weird because when it came out on DVD, I remember I told my mom I was sick that day. I totally lied. She went to work, and I walked to Movie Gallery and bought it, and because it was close to my house. I get home, I pop it in, and I'm like, this is not what I watched in theaters. What the hell is this ending? Like, this is BS. Track down the theatrical. So now what I do is I watch the director's cut until they get to the shack, and then I put in the theatrical cut. Now,
that's the way to do it.
Is that a lot of work? Yeah, it's more work than necessary, honestly, but I hate that director's cut ending. But everything else about it, I feel like adds to the movie. It being 2 years later instead of one, the relationship with Annie and Laurie is so much more fleshed out in the director's cut. So that's what I do. They get to the shack, I put in the theatrical.
I actually made my own cut of I did exactly what you just said, Nick. I literally put the ending of the theatrical on the director's cut, and that's the way I usually like to watch it, But I have to dig. I think I have it on disc somewhere. So, what about you, Davey?
So I always watch the director's cut. I'm just like, I'll take a couple of those negative points towards the end. I'll take that for all the character development. Everything to me that like feels a little more meaty. Like the reason why I show up for Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 is the character development and to have something different. Like we have all these other normal ass like Michael Myers movies that you can go to and to watch if you want paint by numbers. Like if you want paint by numbers, they're there. So I really like when chances are taken. It's one of the reasons why I really like the David Gordon Green trilogy. Even if everything doesn't work for me, it's kind of like you're grading on a curve, and yeah, I always go director's cut. I wish Michael didn't say die, obviously. I hate it. Don't need him talking, but overall, man, it's just like what you get from the performances. I think the editing is a lot more thoughtful. I watched it with Rob's commentary as well in preparation for this, and one of the things he talks about a lot is he felt like the editing was rushed, and when he went back, he was like, oh man, like there are these things that I need to bring back in. And I feel like everything he brings back in tells a better story. I'm a guy that likes character development. I like arcs, and I think story and characters should be above everything else. So I'll take that. Just like this, the same reasons I'll take the producer's cut of Curse over the theatrical cut, because the things it does well, the things it does well, I really like. There's some scenes in that movie that makes me feel like I'm watching the original. So I'll take that, and I'll take a new metal score, a score that's a little more timeless. So yeah, director's cut all the way, every time.
Well, when I was watching the director's cut yesterday, and I guess it had been quite a few years since I watched it, because it's almost as if they cut some of the scenes right before they got really intense, especially with Laurie and Annie. It's almost like the mood completely changed from one scene to another, when they're having like breakfast.
Yeah.
And it just seems like nice and peaceful. And then they cut it. But if you watch the director's cut, Laurie just unloads on Annie and like starts screaming at her. And I think you're right. It does give you a little bit more perspective as to what Laurie's going through, especially post the first movie. Right. And that's one thing I wanted to discuss. I sent you guys like just a list of talking points. And I think this movie is the most psychologically driven Halloween movie out of the entire franchise. Like it really gets in your head, and I think you see up front, you almost forget about Myers. You're seeing the effect that Myers has emotionally on characters, especially Laurie. And I love that about this. Nick, is that one of the driving forces behind why you love Halloween 2, or is there something different?
Yeah, see, I'm not a nihilist. Like I'm really, really not. But There is something about
Swear I'm not a nihilist.
I swear I'm not. There's something about when a movie is like, hey, you know how, because Hollywood is so Hollywood. It's always a happy ending. Things always work out. And Rob decided to take some serious subject matter and go like, what if it didn't work out though? Like, what if it got worse? Like, and I feel like that's a really interesting way to look at it, because especially in our country, and it has been for decades, some people don't have the resources to pull themselves out of dark places like that. And sometimes that is a reality. It's sad. It sucks, but sometimes you can unravel, and that unraveling doesn't stop. And so, yeah, this movie has so many layers to it, man. It's like an onion. I always hate when people argue about hating this movie because they're like, Michael grunts and he looks like a hobo. And it's like, you guys are missing like everything about this movie. The entire point of this movie is like PTSD and the effect of it. And instead of, oh, everything got better, we're best friends again and everything's great and Michael's gone. Now, okay, what if that didn't happen though? And it almost, I feel like, kind of challenges the viewer to, I don't know, accept something they're not used to seeing. And I think for a lot of people, they didn't jive with that vibe. But yeah, it's incredibly psychological, as brutal as it is. And it is a very brutal movie. Like you said, man, I don't even really pay much attention to Myers in this movie. There's a couple scenes where I'm like, oh yeah. Like most of the time I'm in it for Laurie and Annie and Sheriff Brackett. Like that's what takes it home for me personally.
Yeah, I think this is definitely Laurie's movie, even more than Myers. I mean, Laurie's always been kind of the counterbalance to Myers, but I don't look at this movie, I guess, in that fashion. I like it because I'm fully focused on Laurie and how is she gonna pick up the pieces. They show her at the beginning looking at the mirror, and if you just look at the first quarter of this movie, you would swear that Laurie's not going to make it out of this. Even if Myers wasn't in the picture, she's going down a really dark path. And you wouldn't be surprised if she slipped into, drug use, depression, pick your poison. And then you got Myers coming back and she's having to rise to the occasion. So you could kind of compare like the way they dealt with Laurie in Halloween 2018 is a completely different way, because she pretty much became, like a warrior. Whereas that's not at all what Laurie is in this movie. She's pretty much just forced to get up. So, Davey, what would you like prefer in terms of Laurie? Do you like that she's, like we really get in her head and just see how fucked up she is? Or do you kind of prefer what they do with, like, say, Jamie Lee Curtis in her gung-ho type movies? Because I almost feel like Jamie Lee Curtis would be like, no, you need to rewrite that. I don't want to be that character. Whereas I applaud Scout Taylor Compton for being up for anything, right? So I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, her performance here is amazing. She knocks it out of the park. I think that there's nothing. I like her performance in the first film. Like, she does a great job at playing, like, sweet Laurie, but also there's like a little naughty, like more modern kind of side to her too. She's not as like Jamie Lee Curtis in the original looks straight up like a mom, even though she's supposed to be 17. Like, she just looks like bland and boring and like done, I don't mean mom in that way. You know what I mean when I'm saying mom. But Scout here, I feel like, one of the things that Rob talks about in the commentary is that they didn't have a lot of time to rehearse. And I think, like, in a way, that might have been, I always think about, like, when you're making a movie, it's almost like the hurdles you run into. They're like opportunities to be more creative and maybe like squeeze some really nice juice. Like, you have a low budget, so you're going to find out a way to make the effects like practical and simple, but they're still going to be effective because you'll shoot them right. And then with limited rehearsal time here, I feel so much urgency in the performances. And I think, like, that's one of the things. It's like, guys, we can't fuck around. We don't have a lot of time. Like, we got to nail this. And I think part of like nailing this is trusting your actors. I think Rob does a really great job casting people, not just people like Scout who are going to carry over, and of course Brad Dourif, but then having people that are just in the movie for a little bit, like Mary Birdsong from Reno 911 as Loomis's assistant. She's awesome. Getting Howard Hessman from Head of the Class, which I love that show from the 80s. Really fun little sitcom. He plays the owner of the record store, like the older hippy dippy guy. And I think what's really cool is when you bring in those people, you trust them. You're sort of in a crunch. You certainly don't trust the studio because of everything that they've been doing with you. And I feel like what they get here is so awesome. It's another reason why I think the director's cut is better, because you're really seeing like more of what they left out there for everyone. Like they kind of let it all hang out. I do feel like, you know, Scout in this film, one of the reasons why Myers isn't in it so much is that she's sort of like a beacon. Like, yeah, he sees his mom and the horse and his younger self and everything, but it's almost like he sort of like feels that he's getting closer to her. And the closer Michael gets to Laurie, the more like Michael Laurie becomes. And I think that's like a huge part of the psychology here. And I think people should remember, you know, when you look back at films, everything's like context, right? So it's like when you watch something that's older, you have to sort of try to put yourself in that time. And I saw a comment earlier, I think it might have been Scott that said this, maybe it was somebody else, about saying that it was like, it took balls to focus on the trauma. And yeah, then it wasn't a thing. Now it's the thing. And so I think that's really cool too, that in that way it's ahead of its time.
What's up, guys? You are at the end of the DDLive clip. What I do is I like to clip these out if I think the topic is important or something that's newsworthy. So thank you for watching, and if you want to watch more, you can go over here, you can go over here, click on one of those, and hopefully I can do this for 20 seconds, which I think I did. Okay, so yeah, thanks for watching, guys.